Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish. I'm your host this week, alone again. Andy has some stuff going on, so I'm going to solo interview this because I've crushed two of them already. And we have an awesome guest tonight, a former Coach Rossi disciple who we had on in the first season of Dugout Dish. And then I think I texted you the other day, you're the sixth or seventh that we've had. So his coaching tree is rather impressive. But tonight we're joined by Illinois Wesleyan head coach Mike Kellar. Mike, welcome.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Keith. I appreciate you having me. Got the kids down and had a day off of practice today. So excited to spend a little time and catch up and talk Coach Rossi and everything else.
Oh God, it's the best. The getting the kids thing down is where it gets a little hairy as they get older. My wife and I spent 20 minutes this evening, looking for Lightning McQueen. My son was refusing to go to bed unless he had Lightning McQueen, and we tore the house apart. And once we gave up, obviously we found him. So crisis averted after that. Yeah. But before we get started here, just give our listeners a rundown of where you've been and how you've gotten to the role of head coach, where you're at.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It started, go back to, Siena, got my start at Siena, about a year and a half out of school, was trying to continue playing, got hooked up with an independent team, ended up having some shoulder issues and needing surgery. And so, kind of did that and just never came back. So, okay. Hey, I wanted to get into coaching. So applied to a bunch of different places and, Coach Rossi had an open position for a volunteer, and with my connections, having played at Niagara in the MAC, the MAAC, I want to make sure I stress the second A.
First time champions last year.
Yeah. Yes. So Coach McCoy and the Purple Eagles got it done and had an unbelievable year. But I think with his knowledge, he obviously remembered me as a player. I will say I think I beat Siena twice. I think that's correct, and not to throw any shade at Coach Rossi and Siena, but did that and worked out well. Went out for in 2000, I think it was 2011, as a volunteer. Spent 1 year as a volunteer. George Brown, who's now at St. John's, was the pitching coach at the time. He moved on to Monmouth and the pitching coach recruiting coordinator position opened up. So I stayed there. 2 years, was very fortunate. We had an unbelievable group of seniors, and I mean guys in general. I don't want to do a disservice to the rest of those guys, but had a great group at Siena. We're very fortunate enough. We won a MAC title, made some noise in the regional, won Siena's first ever NCAA tournament game baseball wise, beat Dallas Baptist, and kind of parlayed that into a full-time job at Illinois State. Spent 4 years there. And for me, that was kind of a homecoming. I'm from the Bloomington Normal area, just outside of town. Spent most of my life growing up about 20 minutes outside of town. Both my father and my grandfather played football there. My sister played softball. I was kind of the black sheep that went out east and did something different, but obviously always had dreams and aspirations of ultimately playing there. But shoot, second best thing is, hey, I got to go back as a coach. Had a great 4 years. Wouldn't change a thing about it. I will say, we were put in a tough position in terms of losing a lot in the draft and kind of rebuilding with their head coach leaving as, one of the assistants got hired and we came on board, but had a great 4 years. I honestly will say we did a great job recruiting. We just didn't get a lot of wins, unfortunately. But had a good experience there. And then, I've been at Illinois Wesleyan since this is my 7th year. I spent 6 as an assistant, kind of another very Coach Rossi-esque head coach that had been at one place for 37 years as the head coach and got to work underneath him for the past 6. And then he decided to retire this past year and fortunate enough with my relationship and I guess the body of work that we had and our AD's confidence, hopefully, in me and what we had done that was given the opportunity to be the next head coach and just excited to kind of put my stamp on an already awesome school and awesome program and kind of see what we can do.
It's awesome. I think the one thing that'll probably shine through this interview a little bit more than some of the other ones we've done is that we have very similar career paths And ultimately what I did at RPI and what you're currently doing at Illinois Wesleyan is a lot similar to pretty much a mirror image of what I did. I spent 5 years in admissions there, and you spent 6, I believe, working admissions and being an assistant coach, and then ultimately becoming the head coach. And we talked about this on the pre-show a little bit, that I'm grateful for that time, and this holds true in a lot of Division III schools, that you might end up with some more responsibilities as a coach that are not just straight up coaching. Maybe not so much as a head coach anymore as it used to be in the past, but definitely as an assistant, where you end up having to do some other things, whether it's admissions or facilities or whatever it might be at the particular institution. But I think, we talked about, I thought it made me a better public speaker. It made me a better recruiter. You had to learn everything it is that you needed to know about the school to talk to non-athletes and families and convince them that that's the best place for them. And I felt like in turn that helped me become a better face for our program to get more people in, because it really was a one-stop shop. I would still send people to admissions, but on those time crunch things, or they have questions after they leave, hey, I know everything it is that you need to know about these programs. And I just felt like that was something that made me better in that regard. And I'm interested to see how it's gonna how you'll feel about it in another 365 days after you kind of get your first class under your belt.
Yeah, it was good. And I know we touched on it. It was just, it helped me, because I think at our level, Division III, as important as baseball is, I don't want to slight the importance of baseball in a guy's decision. I just think there's a little more weight that's put on the academic side and what a student is going to get there, because I think there's just a little more understanding that, hey, baseball's going to end. As much as we've got some pretty talented guys, I know you had some good ones at RPI. We've had some really good ones at Wesleyan as well. But for most, they get done here. It's time they're going out into the real world. And I think knowing what they get academically and being able to talk to them about that. And I'm the same way. I love our admission staff, does a phenomenal job. And we definitely, that's part of our visits, and we send them over there because of what they do. But I think in the process, as you go through it, because it's not just one visit or one conversation, you're having multiple visits, them coming to campus, maybe doing overnights, coming back, games, practices, things like that. And then obviously phone calls and text messages. They always have questions. They always have something. And I think when you can answer those, it's always big. And I think it maybe puts parents ease at mind, their mind at ease a little bit, that, hey, I've got somebody that kind of knows and will be there. And, the focus will be on, the academic side as well as the baseball side. I mean, just a plug for our guys last year. I know a lot of teams get those ABCA team academic awards, academic excellence awards, but gosh, we had a 3.59 team GPA last year, I think, which for a team is awesome. Mm-hmm. I think is incredible. But having that background and having that knowledge, it just, like you said, it makes you a little more reputable with parents and kids, and you can kind of be their go-to, which is always good. You want them to come with your questions and develop that relationship, and I think that helps.
Yeah, I think it certainly helps on the parent side of things, where because ultimately, and Andy and I talk about this a lot on here and with people we work with, when you go on visits, you want your kids to sit in front, the kid that you're recruiting to sit in front and ask valid questions that are important to him. I hated the question of do you go to Florida every year? Yeah, man, just look at the schedule. For the last 27 years, we've gone down there. And it doesn't, my point when I say that, I make light of it, but that doesn't necessarily show me that you're not necessarily the most prepared for this. And I think sometimes when, you get past all of that stuff, and mom and dad, they have their questions about the support that you're going to get academically, or the support that you're going to get if, you're struggling mentally or physically, and when because you have to know that stuff being admissions, we have RPI, it's called ALAC. We have ALAC, which is Assistant Learning. I'm going to mess up the acronym because I haven't been there in years. But anyways, it's this Assistant Learning Center for students on campus. You have that. There's tutoring, there's supplemental instruction, there's a lot of different things that are applied. And then when you can dive into all of that, of what that means, and then also supplement that with we have study hall here, and this is what you have to get out of study hall. And oh, by the way, we also have a lot of guys on this team that are super smart. If you're struggling in chem, like I have 9 chemical engineers that have a 3.5 and up. Like they can come to study hall and tutor you in that too. And I always felt that was always a big thing for families. Like, it's not some random person. And some people like, I think especially at high end academic schools, like the Division III world, and you probably see this, like your freshmen have rarely struggled academically in their lives. And then they show up to campus and like they struggle that freshman year and they don't necessarily know how to A, voice it, and B, where to go for answers because they've never had to. And I think it's a lot easier when you have that stuff laid out in the recruiting process. Plus also like, hey man, if you're struggling, like again, I got 10 mechanical engineers here. Like they can come sit down with you and talk you through this stuff. And it's a teammate. It's someone that you're comfortable with sitting in front of you, not some random person that you're going to be a little bit more intimidated by. And I think like knowing that stuff along with what you talk with, like you talk about your team and then you can supplement it with everything it is that you know from the admissions side. Like you can put a lot more people at ease. Like, hey, this is the right place and the right guy to go play for.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely it was a huge resource and a great tool. And I think too, like you had mentioned earlier, just the public speaking side, like you get done with that job and having to do presentations and talking at open houses and being at, high schools in front of, sometimes you may talk to an entire senior class, again, not a high school of 4,000 kids, but, you may talk at a high school where they have 100, 200 seniors. And it's just like, it's something where you just get used to it. That's the one thing that kind of blows my mind. I think about just my ability to do that early on and then what it is now. Like, it's something like I don't even bat an eye when I've got to talk to 30, like I now have to teach classes and have, a class of 20 students in a theory of physical education class. And it does not bother me one bit to get up in front of them and talk and do that. And it's like, gosh, if I did that 7 years ago, I'd have been not a nervous wreck, but just been like super uncomfortable. And it's that's another good thing too, especially when you talk about going to camps and recruiting and, especially among our guys, we've got 50 guys on our roster. That's a lot of guys to get up in front of and do that and deliver a message. And hopefully it's a message that has some meaning and some value in it. Mm-hmm. But that skill was another one that is awesome and has really helped.
No, it's funny. I remember I had to do like, mock info sessions. And my last one was with the director, Karen Long. Amazing. Like, what a pleasant person to work for. I love that lady. But she was like, 3 minutes in, she's like, can you stop moving? Like, you just pace. Like, you move too much and your hands are moving. And I was like, I felt like Ricky Bobby. I was like, I don't know what, like, I'm so used to like coaching and moving and talking. And like, I'm not stationary when I coach. So like, it was hard for me to get over. And ultimately, like when I did, I became a lot better at it. And then, it's funny because fast forward when I became a head coach, like same thing, like as an assistant, I paced all the time. When I became a head coach, I paced. And fortunately I had an assistant who, was very open with me. And he was like, bro, you pace too much and you make everybody nervous. And I was like, I can't sit still. Like I'm anxious. Like that was just how I did it. And I was like, okay. And then like when I stopped and just sat down, like the relief in the dugout and on the field was like palpable. And I was like, oh, well, this is kind of like the info session where I was just walking back and forth. It was just, I didn't know, so it's funny how like a lot of those things eventually come kind of full circle on you. And, I'm grateful for the time that I spent there. Like I wouldn't be able to do this. Like, we're 130 plus episodes in and stuff, but like, we've certainly, like you said, like my first info session to the last one I did, like it was night and day. And now like you listen back to our first ones, like, I kind of cringe when I listen back to what they are, what they were. And now I'm like, all right, it takes you a while to like get used to your voice. And, now I'm like, whatever, it doesn't shake me anymore. So no, it's funny, but we'll kick this off. Our first question we always ask people, how do you guys go about finding players for your program?
Yeah. I mean, I think I hope it's a healthy combination of a lot of different avenues. I think if you get tied into one, specific, whether it's just, going out and watching guys consistently. And obviously I have a big thing. Guy that I worked for at ISU was big. Like, we would go out and watch guys 3 or 4 times, and we would get, multiple evaluations of them just to be sure. I don't know how much at our level you can do that with resources and time and everything. And now, especially with how much teams are all over the map, I think it's changed even within the last 5 or 10 years and even before then. But, I think going out and seeing guys is big. We're super, super fortunate here. That Diamond Sports Promotions is a kind of a tournament company located, actually. The guy who owns it is a former Evansville, ISU, Iowa assistant coach. His father, Tim Brownlee, was an Evansville kind of legend and coached at ISU, but he runs the DSP tournaments, and we have tournaments at our field in town every weekend. So like, there's never a time, even if I decide not to go out and I send Coach Lori, our assistant, out on the road. I can be watching games in town, which is awesome. There's always teams that maybe I think go under the radar a little bit, just teams that you normally maybe wouldn't recruit from and think about, that you can go out and see and double check and get names and find some solid players. I think a lot of it's also on recommendations. Hopefully, I feel like I've developed a pretty good network of coaches, especially here. I unfortunately lost a lot of my connections out east when I was at Siena, but the connections here in Illinois with the programs, and coaches, and relying heavily on them. Like, hey, you've got guys. Who do you think, you've sent guys here in the past, or, guys that have been successful in our program? Who do you have that you think kind of fits that mold, academically? Obviously, baseball wise, there is a financial component that sometimes plays a factor as well. Like that's something that we have to worry about, unfortunately, but it is what it is. And then I think too, the other great thing is social media. I mean, I can't tell you how many nights I find when I get done with work on my computer, I sit on my phone and I've got, a laundry list of Twitter accounts, I guess X accounts, I should say, that we follow that are posting recruits and guys all the time, and guys that, as much as you can get out as much as humanly possible, you'd never know about, just because you can't be everywhere. And like I said, with myself and our full-time assistant, we can really only be 2 places at once. Finding guys on social media, and it's been a great tool. You can send them a message and be like, hey, let's talk. Let's set up a phone call. I saw your video. Obviously the need is there positionally. Let's talk, have a conversation, see where you're at, see the interest, and kind of go from there. But I think it's kind of all of those things are kind of try to do them as equally as possible. Use recommendations, go out and see guys, and then, obviously using social media to maybe lead us onto some players that we typically wouldn't see maybe from, different areas of Illinois or the Midwest.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I had a phone call earlier tonight with a family, and one of their questions was, should I be doing more on Twitter or X? I'm going to call it Twitter. Should I be doing more on Twitter? And it's 2026, and I'm a super high-end academic kid, and I think he's got a shot to play in college. And I always answer it's up to your comfortability level, right? Like, some people aren't necessarily the most comfortable doing stuff. I was like, but you go tag, you tag a couple of those uncommitted or flat ground, like you tag those things. Like, I was like, I still follow them. Like, my feed is full of the amount, like, just high school baseball kids, swings, pitches, whatever it is. It was like, and it's an easy way to kind of just get on the radar of some people. And I think the other part too, like, you probably do the same thing that I used to do, like, and I still do it. Like, someone emails me, I Google them instantly if I don't have video. And if I can pull up PBR or perfect game and I can see metrics and all that stuff, like, instantly I'm either going to be like, yeah, that's going to be too short for us, or that's interesting. And then, some people will go down the Twitter rabbit hole and try to find you there. Or, if I have everything in front of me on PBR or perfect game or whatever, then like, okay, I don't really have to go any further. But like, I might follow you on Twitter and see if I can, find some other stuff, find some more information about you. And, it's true because it shrinks the country, right? Like, when you and I grew up and we first started coaching, like, this wasn't a thing. Like, there wasn't a social media platform at all. I mean, I think Twitter was just coming out, but like, it wasn't when we were in college, that I can assure you. Not that we're old. I'm not saying you and I are old, because we're not. But we didn't have this, like, this wasn't a thing that was a part of our recruiting process, and these kids have kind of grown up in it. And I think it can go a lot of different ways, but I definitely think, to your point, like it can open a lot more doors that you didn't think were necessarily available, because it's not geographic anymore. It's like, you can find kids from California or Washington or Arizona and be like, hey man, like, so it looks like you're looking for high-end academic opportunities. Like, I got a spot for you potentially, if this, like, let's have a conversation and see where this goes.
Yeah. And I think too, it leads to those different areas. If you find a guy on Twitter, then it leads to, okay, hey, I'm going to call somebody, I'm going to call his high school coach. I'm going to call his summer coach. And then it leads to us, hopefully, hey, everything lines up. We're going to go see him, or vice versa. Hey, we're at a tournament and we see somebody. I really like him. Hey, now I'm going to do some digging. I'm going to go find his Twitter or find his measurables, on PBR, and then I'm going to call and do recommendations. And I think all of those things are kind of interchangeable. It may be a little bit different which one comes first, depending on what you're doing. But I think a healthy balance and using those things equally is always huge, especially when, again, I'll stress, limited resources, not having a staff of, having 3 full-time assistants that can go out and you can be everywhere you need to be on a weekend. You got to pick and choose and be smart and use your time wisely. And I think having those resources hopefully allows you to do that, work smarter, not harder, as they say.
I think the other thing too, like, and you've probably felt this way, likely when you got into coaching and we were running the rat race with Coach Rossi, where you get your Excel spreadsheet of where you're going to be every day at every single point in time, and you have to be the first one there. But like I think when you're a younger coach, you feel like you're missing stuff when you're sitting at a field. And it's true, but I feel like you can get on Twitter and be like, you know what? I'm not missing what's going on in PBR Ohio this week. Like, I have the entire feed of every single kid's BP and 60 times and metrics and velos. And like, there could be an event that, to your point, like, you don't have the resources in order to do it. And I mean, I live that life. I know what that looks like. But I could be sitting at a field at Diamond Nation and be in between games and flip on Twitter and be like, oh wow, okay, I wanted to go to this event, we couldn't, but like, all right, here's the couple kids that I liked. Like, all right, looks like they're doing pretty good. I'm going to make sure that I follow up with them next week and see what happens there, because there might be an opportunity at some point in the summer where you can see them, and you'd rather have that opportunity than kind of let it fall by the wayside. And I think, like, in that regard, it's made recruiting a little bit more difficult, but it's definitely made it better and more competitive for a lot of schools that would not have otherwise seen some of these kids. Like, for me, when I was at RPI, like, you had to recruit nationally. Like, and I say that, and sometimes I feel a little ashamed because it sounds like I'm like, LSU. Like, you had to do it because it's $80,000 a year and it's a STEM school where the vast majority of kids are in engineering. There's only so many kids in the Northeast that fit that bill, right? So like, you go look at the roster, like, they're from California, they're from Washington, they're from Texas, they're from Florida, they're from Mid-Atlantic, they are from the Northeast and New England, like, it's from all over the place. And I think, like, it certainly made my life easier when I was able to find a lot of that stuff, because it was like, all right, like, yeah, I can't go to California 5 times during the summer and sit on some of these tournaments to see these kids play, but I can at least get some information off of Twitter, and then talking to their coaches and figuring out whether or not this is going to be a good fit, and go that route. And you don't feel like you're making a rushed or uninformed decision or taking a flyer on somebody, because like, you have way more information than we had when we started doing this, 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Hunter, I think it just helps I think you kind of said it perfectly. Like, even for us, I mean, our demographics are going to be a lot of Illinois kids, a lot of suburb kids. Most of our roster is going to be from Illinois. I mean, that's just the way that it kind of breaks down. But the one thing that we can do is, hey, like right now in the fall, we've got practices on weekends, trying to, make the most out of a 4-hour practice or 4-hour scrimmage on weekends, and not have to deal with guys getting out late for class or maybe having to leave to do a lab. where we can have a scrimmage and a practice on a Saturday, Sunday. Well, what the downfall of that is we can't get out and recruit. But with social media, all the stuff, like I can go on Sunday night and I can look at all the guys that we're recruiting, if they're playing in a fall tournament, how they did. And then, hey, Sunday night, Monday morning, hey man, looked like you had a great tournament. And I think just being able to check in, show that love, and yeah, you can't be there, but guys know that, hey, you're checking in on them, you're watching, you're following. And I think that's I think big, because I think it shows them love, and you still have the resources to get a job done, even when you might be, I say stuck in Bloomington Normal because we've got a 12 inning scrimmage on a Saturday.
Right. And that's the other thing too. Like I think one of the things that kind of gets missed, especially at the Division III level, is there's such finite window of time that you can actually be with your players in the fall. And, you can't give up that time, especially on the weekends, and especially at high academic schools. Like, you're not always going to have everybody at practice during the week, right? Like, you're going to have some juniors and seniors that have to take classes on Thursday or Wednesdays that are only offered in the fall at 3 p.m. And you're like, really? We can't offer this at like 10 a.m.? But okay. So you're always going to be down some guys, and you don't want to give up that time on the weekends where you can have full team stuff and you can inter-squad and you can go over so much. Like, when you only have two coaches, you're like, one of you isn't leaving to go recruit because, it's more important. Like, and I used to always tell these people, like, you want to go to a place where your coaches are actually going to be there on the weekends to coach you, not going and looking for the next guys. Like, is it going to happen? Like, when fall season's over, like, yeah, they might not be around, but that's okay. Like, you want them on the field helping and developing you then. And I think that like the social media aspect of things has really been able to kind of make you feel as a coach that, like, you aren't missing out on some of that stuff while choosing to do the right thing. Like, it's an odd thing in coaching, and anyone who's a coach who listens to this understands what we're saying. Like, it's an odd thing in coaching to be on the field with your players and be like, actually, I would really like to see these two kids throw this week because I think they can really help us next year. But, like, you need to be there with your players. But now, like, I can just go on Twitter and be like, all right, I just saw, 5 pitches, and then I can get the whole video and watch his entire outing and have all the velos attached to it. Like, do I really need to be there? Like, and in some regards, yeah, you do. But if you've seen it in the summer a handful of times, like, you're probably like, you're still on the kid. Like, it's not really going to change a whole hell of a lot.
Yep. 100%.
So, we keep kind of dancing around the high academic thing. Like, what, we always like to say, like, at the high academic world, you're looking for guys who are good at baseball, who happen to have good grades, not the reverse of, like, I'm looking for really good students who happen to play baseball. Like, what are you looking for from a student standpoint that also matches up with what you are looking for baseball wise?
Yeah. I think it's really, I think it, especially at our level, holds true. We're not going to get guys, and not that I don't want to slight the talent that our guys have, because we have some really talented guys, some guys that are hard-working baseball players, that were good high school baseball players that have turned themselves into even better college baseball players. But we're not going to get the guys that can roll out of bed and just be, all Americans. That's just not the type of talent that we get. This isn't, SEC school and guys, I think. And the one thing that I kind of stress to our guys in the recruiting process is that, I think there's a lot of carryover between guys that care about school and guys that care about baseball. And obviously there's a talent component to that. They have to have some skills and they have to be able to do some things on the baseball field. But usually if those guys are good students and they care about their work in the classroom, they strive to do well, they challenge themselves, take AP classes and all that good stuff, and they're good baseball players, I think there's a lot of carryover because of the time that, we ask our guys to do things, weightlifting and strength and conditioning stuff that we may not be able to necessarily be around, or say, hey, you've got to be here at this certain time, but they know the importance of it. It's important to them. They're going to work at it. Sorry, my dogs. Hey, knock it off. They're going to invest in it just like they do on the academic side. So I think there's a lot of tie-ins, especially our level, getting really good students that work hard and understand and know the importance of, hey, my commitment to academics. And then, hey, we find some things that we like on the baseball side that, man, they're talented. They're do this. We know that one, there's probably not a concern that they're going to do what they need to academically, but hey, even more so, I think on our end, like they're going to put the time and effort and they understand like they want to be good at it. There's a desire to be a high level player. And so I think that's one big thing that we focus on. If there's both those areas match up, then I think then we're pretty good. But, I just, hardworking, good people, obviously, test scores and all that stuff is important. I'm still a big believer that, to me, especially now that the test optional routes have become more prevalent, since COVID and things like that, you're a hitter and you bat 350 over, 12 seasons, compared to a guy that got hot for 2 weeks and batted 500, but overall he's a 225 career hitter. To me, I think the long-term success in the classroom is big. And that's a guy that, hopefully they've got the GPA to get in, but go to bat for them and do those types of things. Because I think they're the guys that are going to work hard, because that stuff is like when you have to be in class every day and you have to do homework and all that stuff, it, to me, stresses a lot about who they are as a person when they really do well, in the classroom over the course of a semester, a year, 4 years.
Yeah, I think the question, like we asked this question in many different iterations, but the answer is generally going to be what you just said. And I think one of the things that the reason we like asking the question, this type of question, is like to get people to understand that when you go to college, it's like always on the front end, the better grades you have, the more doors are going to be open to you and stay open longer. Right. Like, if you're going to be a 2.8 student, there's a lot of doors that are instantly shut. The flip side to that is it cues the coaches into a lot of things of like, aside from the fact that the better grade you are, again, like the doors stay open, but at any division, you're going to command more merit scholarship money, which could then instantly reduce how much money, baseball money, they have to give you, because you end up with the same package. But like it cues them into like, all right, this kid cares about what he's doing off the field. And he's a really good baseball player and he's talented. Like he probably cares a lot about what he does off the field as well. And, I would say that rings true the vast majority of the time. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like there's so much more that goes into the college baseball game than just playing baseball. Like you still have to go to class. You have to do homework. You have to go to lift. You have to eat right. You have to go to sleep. You have to manage your social life. There's a lot of things that you like. And when you're 18 years old and on your own and have never necessarily had to do that before, generally speaking, the kids that I recruited in my career who were really squared away academically made that transition pretty easily. Like it's not something that like they have day one, right? But like, by the end of September, middle of October, like they're doing pretty well. They have their feet under them academically. They're being able to handle a lot of the stuff. Like it's the kids that like maybe struggled a little bit. And like, you're going to take those kids too. And that generally in the recruiting process. But like, those are the ones where it's like, man, like my wife likes to say, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, I'm going to have to hold your hand for like 10 months, bare minimum, to like get you through your freshman year to make sure that you're going to be okay. And having too many of those kids can sometimes like make it to be a drain, coaching. But, I think like the one thing, like you mentioned lifting, like it's become so much more prevalent in baseball over the last decade, maybe a little bit more than it like, we lifted in college, but it wasn't something that like, it wasn't what it is now. And you see the physicality of these kids and the care and, the other side, and we'll get into lifting here in a second, but like the amount of time you spend doing other things, because you only have a finite window again in the fall in Division III, like you're going to be on your own. You want to trust that these guys can, like, they care enough about themselves to make themselves better, because, you can't be at lift and you can't do some of these things. Like you got to trust that they're going to do it on their own. And those guys that kind of are squared away academically generally are the ones that like, I don't have to worry about this. But the lifting piece, like, and the physicality of college baseball, like, there's guys at the Division III level that are like, they are way more physical than guys that I played with at Division I in 2004 and 5. Like it's not even close. Like I saw a huge change leading up to COVID and even after, but like the physicality of these guys, like, you know, I think Tennessee's like average weight last year was like 217 pounds. Like, I mean, I'm not saying I was a huge dude, but like I played at 215. Like I'm like an average guy in 2024. Like that's a crazy thing to kind of think about. Like when you think back that like these guys are physical specimens, and it's not just at the Division I or II level, it's at Division III too. And it's, you know, it's not. I'm interested to get your thoughts because I fought this battle and I fight this battle on this podcast quite frequently, that like I want to dispel the myth that Division III baseball is like 13th grade. Like you can just get into school and you can go walk on and try out and you're going to make the roster. Like it's really good baseball, and you have to do way more than just be good at baseball in wherever it is you're coming from.
Yeah. I mean, I would almost argue it's a little bit tougher. And the desire has to be, again, I don't want to slight because, you know, again, I played, you know, I was fortunate enough. I went to a junior college and I got to play at the Division I level and I coached the Division I level. And it's not a slight against those guys because they were ultra talented. A lot of those guys that we coached, you know, had desire. But I think when the Division III level, there's times where, you know, you don't necessarily, you're not forced to do it. You know, I think there's a difference when you're forced to do it. And I mean, I think that's why we stress, you know, I think it's I think I pulled it from, you know, Coach Corbin at Vanderbilt, you know, they had the signs get to versus have to, you know what I mean? Like that is truly, that rings so true at the Division III level. Like you don't have to do anything. Like if you don't want to show up to lifts in November, you know, no coach is going to, you know, again, they shouldn't, whether they do or not, I don't know, but the rules say like, you can't be punished for not going to lifts. Like, and so I think when you go through the recruiting process and you tell those guys, like, we have to recruit the right guys. And there's a lot of intangible things that like, hey, we know that there's already somebody that gets in the weight room and there's somebody that believes in that and understands our vision, because I you know, that's one thing we kind of did at ISU and I believed in it, is like, you know, we're going to make every link of that chain as strong as possible. And how we're going to do that is by absolutely busting our butts in the weight room, you know, to make everybody bigger, faster, stronger. And then hopefully, obviously, you know, we're developing you as a hitter or pitcher, and then you're faster, bigger, stronger. You're going to throw harder, and you know, you're going to hit the ball farther. I think that's why you see all the crazy numbers that you do, you know, velocity wise, you know, power wise, and things like that. But I just, you know, there's something to that, and the desire for our guys. But, you know, circling back to, you know, what Division III baseball is, I mean, I'll just give you a few examples from us personally. A couple years ago, we had two guys, one who ended up being drafted in the 16th round. If we don't have COVID and, you know, our season shuts down after 9 games, and he comes back, that was his junior year. He comes back as a senior and ends up having Tommy John. He's probably drafted out of Illinois Wesleyan. One of his teammates, who is another relief pitcher, they got done. They graduated. We have no graduate school. They're not 5th-year seniors or 6th-year seniors, you know, with extra eligibility. They're done after 4 years. They went down to Illinois Springfield, Division II school, really good Division II school. And they both got to go to a College World Series and help them get there. We had an outfielder who, again, graduated, had extra eligibility. He went down to Eastern Illinois a couple years ago and was their 4th outfielder on a team that went to a regional. Our center fielder last year was an all-region guy. He's playing at Cincinnati this year. The examples that I use and what I stress at the Division III level is, I think, especially now, because baseball, I think at every level has just, the talent has increased. And I think you'll see even more of that now with these new rules. You know, roster limits and things like that. I think it's only going to help out Division II, Division III. I mean, junior college is already, I don't know, they're already good. You know, I don't know. They don't see a lot. They are what they are. It's really good baseball. All levels are good baseball. That's no knock there. But I think it's going to make our levels, the Division II, Division III level, better, because, you know, the Division I's can't have as many guys. You know, we are equally as talented in some areas. We're just not as deep as Division I schools. You know, like our first 6, 8 guys could probably pitch at a lot of small Division I's, some mid majors, maybe even some higher level schools. But I will say, our 20th pitcher probably is not a guy that's going to make that type of roster or be a guy that makes a team there. I just think the depth isn't there. I mean, we've had schools that have sent guys on every single year going on to play at, schools like Illinois State, Indiana State, really all over the Midwest. And in our conference and from us personally, I think the talent level is extremely high at the Division III level and what you're going to get, and a lot of good baseball programs. And I tell our guys, hopefully in the recruiting process, and hopefully it holds true, there may be some restrictions on us time wise throughout the course of the year, but you're going to get high level baseball. You're going to get a high level program. It's going to be run like a high level program. The things that you get are going to be like a high level program. We're just at times handcuffed a little bit by rules and what we can do time wise.
Yeah, I think that especially coming out of COVID, the amount of Division III guys that you saw move up and find success, it kind of dispels that. But you're dead right. Like the depth at the Division III level is not what it is at the other levels. But it doesn't mean that it's not still high end baseball. Like, I had a guy leave and go his sixth year, pitched at San Francisco for Soups. I had another one leave and pitched for Mams at Delaware. And those are two guys that, were Division III pitchers. And we had, I want to say we had like 7 guys that were upper 8s, low 9s coming at, on our staff. Like it's not uncommon anymore at the Division III level to see multiple guys that are going to be upper 8s and touch a 90 here and there. Like Rochester had the Sparks kid who was like 94 to 96. Like that kid was electric when he towed the rubber, and like they're littered all over the place. And I think for a lot of different reasons, and, we'll get into the roster limit here in a second, but baseball is that sport where you don't necessarily have to be, it's not like football or basketball, right? Like as popular as baseball has become, and it's awesome for our game and it's super competitive, but it's not like football where like you got to be a super physical dude who runs a 4.4 and, can jump out of the stadium to really be super athletic to go play. Like you can develop at a later date in baseball and still be a really good baseball. Like you're seeing it every year. And like, I don't want to make the exception become the rule, right? Like you're going to see a lot of guys that are going to jump in the portal. Like, there was 2 kids out of Marist last year, and I'll use it because it's my alma mater, but like there's 2 kids who left Marist, and one went to Wake and one went to Louisville. But there's also a lot of kids who jump in the portal and don't end up going up or going to a place like that, right? Like, or even finding a place, so it's not like a catch-all where it works for everyone. But the point is that like at every level, whether it's the mid-major Division I or the Division II level or Division III, like there's dudes all over the place that can really, really play baseball. And it goes back to like, you have to, if you want to be on the field and in the lineup, like you have to do all the things you need to do off the field. And that's being in the classroom, that's being in the weight room. Like we're going to have a conversation at the back half of your freshman year where it's like, hey man, like pretty good year. Like I know you didn't take the weight room that seriously and you broke down at the end of the year, and your last 10 games, you hit 0.051. Like that can't happen. I can't leave you in the lineup when your body's breaking down. When you have every opportunity to do it for X amount of months, like you need to make that decision. And, so I do think it's going to only increase the roster limit that's coming down at the Division I level is going to increase everything at the Division II and III level, because you instantly are going to have 6 guys that are no longer on any of those programs. So they're going to have to go down. And you're going to have a bunch of guys, like it or not, everybody, you're going to have a bunch of guys that are going to get dumped right before signing period in another 5 or 6 weeks that are going to be back on the market. And because it's already started to happen, like it's going to.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I know you've probably seen it, just all the tweets of guys that have been committed for a year or 2 years, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm with the changes in the NCAA roster limits and things. I've talked with the coach, and I'm going to decommit and reopen it, which is it stinks. I mean, I think that's a different conversation to talk about, and I get it. those coaches can't help the fact that they're going to have, 6 less roster spots. That's not on them. But I think now moving forward, okay, hey, if this is something that's going to stick, then you talk about, hey, if you're going to commit a kid, you sign them. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be something that goes along with it. But that's not for me. I don't have to worry about that, which is a nice thing. I'm definitely not upset about that. But I think the other thing too that plays into it with high school guys is you got to understand, and it stinks for them, is a lot of these bigger programs that they're holding out hope for. These guys are now going to, and it's not something that just started. It's been happening the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They're just going to go through the portal. I mean, if they can add a physical 21, 22-year-old that has a year or 2 of years of eligibility for a whole, they're going to recruit that guy every day of the week over, a good freshman. And that's no knock against them. They just need a guy that can come in right away and can I guess maybe be more ready. And so I think that's where, we're just, and you said it, find a place where you can play. I don't care. Good school, good facilities, the coaches, the development. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can dive into when you're searching for a school, and it doesn't matter. Division II, Division III, JUCO, NAIA, there's amazing programs everywhere. And if you do your homework and you do your digging, I don't care. To me, it doesn't matter the level. It really doesn't. If you find, hey, a good program that wins, it's like, man, go enjoy your experience and win a lot of games. Hopefully, get some rings and get an opportunity to do something cool. And hey, if you're good enough, people are going to find you too. I mean, I know that's a kind of a cliche and everybody says it, but if you're good enough, I don't, with all those things that we talked about, social media and everything else and word of mouth and connections, guys are going to find you. If you find the right fit, to me, it does not matter the level. It really doesn't. It's just, it's more about, hey, finding what's best for you and where you feel comfortable at.
Yeah. And you're dead right with the portal stuff. And I think that there's a multitude of reasons why, right? Like with the rule change that they can't talk to anyone until July of 20, going into your junior year, that cuts down how much time they actually have on the phone with you to figure out whether or not you're going to be a fit. So, these kids that are jumping in the portal, we all know each other in this business. Like it takes 1 or 2 phone calls to get to that coach to be like, hey, what do you think about this kid? And you can discern a lot more information that way. You can talk to the kid a lot earlier. And then a lot of the bigger schools, if not all of them, the vast majority of Division I schools have TrackMan, have access to Synergy, have True Media. Like they can go back and look at everything you've done in your college career and be like, you know what? I've seen what this kid can do off of, college age hitters or college age pitchers, and he's had a lot of success. Like, I'd rather take that kid for 2 years than a kid that I'm hung up on. I get the reasoning, right? Like I am 1,000%, like I understand the reasoning. Like when you start injecting this much money into college baseball, these are the decisions that are going to get made because ultimately at the end of the day, you have to win, especially at the higher levels, or you're going to be out. So what you presented with that problem, and I get the other argument of it's not going to kill high school baseball. It just means that there's going to be less spots available for high school at those levels. And ultimately what are we talking about? We're talking about the upper ends of college baseball, which was already short to begin with from how many kids are available to go play in those programs anyways. It's not a secret. A lot of these programs were rolling in 45, 50, 55 guys in the fall and then cutting down to 40. So there's 15 guys right there that are out at the start of the year. This actually saves some of those kids the opportunity of making that decision early on and then having to be in the portal with no stats, with no year under their belt. And now you're up against it because it's going to be well, why am I going to take this kid that hasn't played in a year when... And here's the other argument, I can get this 18-year-old who's just as good right now and has a higher ceiling because he hasn't, I have more time with him. So you can go both ways on that argument, but I agree. And the other side of it too is you're not going to deal with it a whole hell of a lot at the higher end academic schools, right? There's not a lot of transfer portal stuff being done at those schools because you have to have certain grades, to get in. And if you're transferring from a school that might not be as good as the school that you're trying to go to academically, you're going to lose credits in the transfer process. And now it's like, all right, like you can come, but like you're starting as a second year freshman. Like you have a lot of work to make up. And that's a decision that you're going to have to make. Like, do I do this, or do I try to go, like, do I go the JUCO route and come back and try to go somewhere else? Like, there's a lot more stuff that goes into those types of decisions. And I think, like, ultimately, I do think that it's going to put the game in a better spot, because you're going to, like, I would like to believe that you're going to have people that are going to make less bad decisions. And I say bad decisions from the standpoint of, like, you get caught up, like, I get it, man. You're 16, 17 years old. You're caught up in what you're seeing at all these programs. And, like, I want to commit and do all this stuff. And, like, ultimately it ends up being the wrong decision. And, you know, but it's going to open up far more spots at the Division II and Division, because there are no roster limits. And not to say that everyone's going to have 45, 60, 70 kids on the roster, but now you can get super selective with what it is that you want. Like that fringe Division I player that, like, you might not get because he might go to a mid-major, you know, he might go to a MAC school. Like now, like that kid's like, you know, Illinois Wesleyan's a pretty good looking opportunity for me. And that kid now, like that floor at the Division III level is going to be raised ultimately, I think, because a lot of this.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see kind of how this all unfolds over the next. I mean, and it's not just going to be a year thing. It's going to be a couple year thing to see how it kind of plays out. But I mean, I'm excited. I think it's going to, you know, an already talented, you know, level that I think at times it just doesn't, people just don't know. And I get it. I can't say that I was probably any different, you know, 7-8 years ago, knowing, you know, and I say that, and, you know, gosh, Wesleyan ended up beating us when I was at ISU. I mean, that's baseball for you. I know, gosh, Michigan a handful of years ago lost to a Division II school, or, I mean, it happens. It's baseball. But I think the more you see it, the more you're around it. And I'm fortunate enough that I get to be around our guys, you know, a lot and see how talented they are. But it's good baseball. We've got good teams in our conference, and even just, you know, knowing the area and the conference, how much every school in our conference has elevated themselves over the last, you know, 10, 15 years with facilities and resources and the coaches that they've hired. I mean, gosh darn, it makes it really tough. It doesn't matter how good you are when you got, you know, 4, 5, 6 other teams in your conference that are just as good or well coached. And, you know, it's a battle. I mean, I think you get that in most places, that you're going to have some really good schools. I know, gosh, you talked about, you know, your conference, you had our RPI. I mean, there's, you know, you got the UMass, Dartmouths, and the schools, Boston's that are loaded, and everything that they get. Obviously, you talk about the Wisconsin schools, the state schools up there that are Division III, very similar to the UMass schools that are state schools, a little bit cheaper, and really good baseball and a lot of good talent there. It's just overall, you know, Division III level baseball's in a good spot, and I think the talent's only going to get better here with some of the rule changes, hopefully.
Oh, without doubt. You know, I thought the one thing, you know, I'll pull the thread on this a little bit too, because I thought you hit on it well, and I want to go down this rabbit hole for a minute. Like the facilities end of your recruiting process, decision making, whatever it might be. Like there are a lot of Division II, Division III, NAIA, JUCO programs that have unbelievable facilities for baseball. And, you know, and it tells you how much they care about the sport, but also like the idea that every single Division I program in the country has the best facilities is a fallacy. Like, you know, aside from Binghamton here in the state of New York, it's got like they have, you know, $100 bajillion to build their facility.
Major League Baseball, minor league facility, unbelievable. Yeah, whatever you want to call it.
It's absurd. It's amazing. Happy for them. But aside from them, like they're the outlier here. You know, there's a lot of Division III programs in New York that have unreal. Like I had an unreal facility at RPI. You know, we had covered cages, we had turf, we had an indoor cage that we could use 24/7, 365. We had a field house that was 3 basketball courts wide that we could go live in and do a lot of stuff in. You know, U of R has an unbelievable facility. They're all turf. They have an indoor field house that they can do literally everything in. RIT has, in my opinion, one of the best facilities outside of Binghamton in this state. Like, it's absurd what they have going on over there. You know, and that's just a couple off the top of my head. Like, it's not just at the Division I level, like the idea that like, oh, it's Division I, they have everything. Like, there's a lot of programs at the Division II and III level, and I like, more about the Midwest than I do, like, that have way more access to facilities and more things that they can actually do at the Division III level that other schools at the Division I level can't. And I think that like it is an important thing in your process, because you want to make sure that you're going to have the ability to develop at a place that has the capabilities of doing that, not only from the coaching standpoint, but from a field standpoint and a facility standpoint. Like, I can't tell you how much better we got at RPI when we got turf, because we could go outside. Like, they snowblow. Our facilities people were amazing. They snowblow it, and our field would be cleared in 2 hours, if that. And it could snow 6 inches the night before, and we're playing a game the next day. But to be able to get out of the gym, like, break up that monotony, take actual fly balls in a real sky, like, take BP on a field, take ground balls and throw 90 feet on a baseball, 180 feet on a baseball field. Like, that makes you so much better. And to be able to have the ability to do that, like, that needs to be something like, and you could weight it whatever you want in your process, but that needs to be a part of the conversation. And you can't just be like, wow, it's a Division III school. Like, what do they have? Like, go look, man. Like, it's absurd what some of these schools have.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that, and I want to stress this. Like, this isn't a knock against Niagara. I loved everything about my experience there. I would not change it for the world. The relationships, the opportunity, everything that I got. I wouldn't change it. I loved it, but I mean, to be honest with you, and I know their facilities have changed a lot here over the last handful of years too. I mean, they've got the brand new turf field. Mm-hmm. When I was there, it was an on-campus all dirt field that was our practice field. We went and played kind of in like downtown Niagara at the old minor league stadium. Sal Magley. And again, it was decent. It was okay. I mean, it was an old minor league stadium, but it was off campus. We didn't ever practice there. We just played there. I mean, it was really, and then I think in the indoor facility, I mean, we didn't have priority hours over in our rec center. I mean, we were either going early in the morning or at like midnight, 10 to midnight when the facility closed. And I mean, just to compare it to what we have here at Wesleyan, I mean, we've got turf infield, all natural grass outfield. I think, you talk about just being outside. I mean, last year may have been a little bit of an anomaly, but we had 20 some odd practices before our first game. We were outside for 16 of them, and that wouldn't happen without turf. It just wouldn't. So we got a ton of time outside. We've got the field house as well. It's like 200 feet wall to wall. If we are stuck inside, our pitchers can throw, our position players can throw, their arms can be in shape. We've got the cage access at any time during the day. We're practicing during the middle of the evening. We're either going 4 to 6 or 6 to 8. Like, we're not waiting for the facility to close so we can use it. Same thing with the weight room and everything. I mean, the facilities are just unbelievable. And I would, and there are some really good ones. Don't get me wrong. You've got the Binghamton and there's a number of schools. There's no slight, but I think when people have that mindset that like, oh, Division III, I'm sure their facilities aren't like, go check it out. Go look. I would put a lot of, especially high level programs that have had success, not only baseball wise, but just overall. I mean, especially like at Wesleyan, gosh, I mean, you can't name a sport that hasn't had some type of success, basketball, national championships, softball, volleyball, every freaking sport, track and field, has had women's soccer. Like, and I know football, and I'm leaving a bunch out, and I don't mean to, but like, you see the banners and stuff in our basketball arena and our rec center, our athletic center, like there's a pride there. There's a sense of like standard and expectations with all of our sports. And, that's why we have the facilities that we have, an on-campus field. We don't have to share with anybody. It's ours. Anything that goes on in our field is around us and what we do. It's awesome. And it's right on campus, and there's a lot of great things, but you're 100% right. Like, and I think some of that is now going away because kids are seeing the type of facilities, but yeah, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Division III, they probably, that's all right. But you get on campus, you're like, holy cow, wow. The resources and facilities there are pretty unique. Yeah.
We had all turf. I know they just turf softball at RPI. We had they have their own hockey rink on campus. The basketball arena and football stadium were absurd. A full track with you could run steeplechases out there. Like, it was absurd the amount of stuff that they had and the quality that you got out of it. I always thought that it was, the longer I was in Division III, I felt like it went away, but like you still find it from time to time. But I'm glad that you touched on like the practice time thing, because it's not a question that comes up a lot. But like in the winter, you're dead right with what you can do, and I think it illustrates the point of like what you have from a facility standpoint. Like, when I was at Marist, I'm the same issue. Like I am forever grateful for going to Marist. I had a phenomenal experience. We went to a regional. Like it was, I met lifelong friends, and everything that I ever came out of that place, I'm indebted to. But like, to your point, like we would practice from 10 to 1 in the morning, and like we're moving the movable bleachers for the hoops game that just ended on Friday night at 10:30, and then going live and taking ground balls and throwing stuff. Like, and we did that for 4 years. Like, I never had to do that at RPI. Like, we would do midnight mayhem or whatever Carl liked to call it. And then I took over and squashed that, just because I didn't want to be there at midnight. But like, we could practice pretty much whenever we wanted to. And like, at the start of the year, like there'd be times in January and February where you can't get outside. Like there'd be days where we would practice from 9 to 11 in the morning. And there'd be other days where we practice from, 5 to 7 at night. And, sometimes you'd have to share with track, because there was an indoor track in our field house. Like, but, it's, you pull the curtains and you can still get everything it is done that you need to get done. And, like that aspect of being a student athlete, sometimes like, we're like the old guard of like, back in our day, you had to walk.
We're getting to that point,
15 miles both ways to school. But it is important, especially when you're at a higher end academic school. Like, you generally have to go back to your dorm and do some homework and study for tests and do all that stuff. Like, you're not, you don't want to be doing that at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, you'd rather be doing that at 9 o'clock at night so you can go to bed and do the things you need to do. Whereas like, we would leave practice at 1:30. Like, you're not getting to bed till 3. And then, oh, by the way, you got to be up for class at 8 o'clock in the morning the next day. So like, it turns into a little bit more of a grind than, especially earlier on in the season. And, February, going to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, like, get to class at 8, like that stinks. And look how far we've come. Now we worry about sleep and nutrition and all this other stuff. Like back then it was like, go ahead, get that 3 hours of sleep and get there into class. You'll be okay. Getting off the bus at 6 in the morning, and I got an 8 o'clock class. I'm going to the cafeteria and getting some breakfast and heading to class here. But listen, I don't want to take up too much of your time. So, our last question, we'll close with this. What advice would you give the families that are going through this process right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting time. I mean, obviously, we've touched on the rule changes, and there's going to be a lot of changes. Things are going to be very different here until, and I think there's always going to be changes. That's the one thing. I don't think, it's not like this is going to be the last change that the NCAA is ever going to make on NCAA baseball. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be things that it's going to continually evolve. I think, and, it's definitely a plug for our level, but I think, we touched on it. I think you're going to find good baseball all over the country at all different levels. And I'll stress that Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, JUCO, there's some awesome programs. And I'm very fortunate. I've gotten to experience outside of NAIA and Division II, coaching and playing at 3 different levels, I think has helped a lot, and gives me a big perspective, a good perspective on what it is. But I think always explore every opportunity, whether it be coaches and different programs at different levels, no matter, hey, what people are telling you or feel like, hey, you should play at this level. I think it's exploring all options, because there may be schools from completely different regions, different levels that you just fall in love with, whether it be from a coaching staff standpoint, facilities, academically, whatever. I think doing that, and then just doing your homework. Again, it's really easy for people to tell you what you should be doing and where you should be looking based on your ability level and things like that. But at the end of the day, you and your parents are your best advocate. You know what's going to be best for you. Your family's going to know what's best for you. I think exploring those opportunities, and then when they do come, take them and run with them a little bit. I mean, there's no coach in the country, I don't think, who would ever be upset if, you have a couple phone conversations, or maybe you go on a visit and you just decide, hey, this isn't the level for me, or I'm getting some opportunities, as long as you communicate that. And I think the ability then to communicate that to people, even when you're not giving them the good news, you're telling them, hey, coach, thanks for the offer. I appreciate everything. Thanks for the opportunity, but I'm going to go to this. I mean, to me, that I get more upset when a guy just kind of ghosts me than actually calls and tells me or texts me and says, hey, coach, thanks for everything. I'm going, I get that. There's a lot of good schools. I get it. If you're a good player, you're going to have options. But I think using this time to develop some of those skills, having tough conversations and communicating, doing that stuff is going to benefit you, not only when you get to school, because you're going to have probably tough conversations with your coaches at times. You're going to have tough conversations with your professors, maybe your parents, whatever. But I think then again, you become an adult, you start, job, you're going to have your boss, you're going to have a wife, you're going to have kids. I think all of that stuff is only going to help you, whether it's good conversations, you get to call and tell a coach you're committing, or you have to call me and say, hey, coach, I thanks for everything. I'm going somewhere else. I think there's some value in that. And whether, kids see that right now, I know it's tough to kind of have that foresight and be like, hey, this is going to be a good thing. But when guys do that, I mean, I have the utmost respect for guys, no matter if they're going to play at, one of our conference rivals or whatever, but at least they had they respected our program, myself, our coaching staff enough to say, hey, I really enjoyed it, but thanks, I'm going to go do that. That means a lot to me. I mean, I hate the fact that they're going somewhere else to play, but I respect the heck out of that. So explore all options, do your homework, and then use those opportunities to help you, I think, long term, no matter what the outcome of those opportunities are.
Yeah, I think it's phenomenal advice. I think that you're probably the first one, and this is episode 130. I don't know what number this will be, but we'll put it in the 130s. That has probably talked about letting coaches know that you're not going, like having that conversation. And I think that that's so important, because like you are going to have tough conversation. It's something that, Andy and I talk about with the people we work with. Like our goal, like you're going to say no more than you're going to say yes. Like ultimately, and that's true for everyone in this process, like whether or not you're working with someone, you're doing your stuff, it doesn't matter. Like the goal is that you say no more than yes. And, but to be able to have that conversation, because yes, it's tough. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Like you're younger, but it's going to prep you for later on, because you're dead right. Like you're going to have a tough conversation likely at the end of the fall. For some people, it's coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks of where they see you fitting in that program this year, and what you need to do in order to get better, and how you need to develop in order to get burn, and things of that nature that you might not have ever heard in your life. Like, hey man, like you're the third shortstop. This is what you need to do in order to get better. And, it preps you for that stuff. And I do think you're dead right. Like it shows the respect of like, hey, like I respect what you guys did for, like, the conversations we had, your program and everything, but I am going in a different direction. And like, I always respected when kids did that. I hated when they called and they were like, I'm going to U of R. And I'm like, ugh, I got to see this kid for 4 years now. Like, this is going to be a nightmare. But, and on the same hand, like, that happens to other coaches when you get that kid that you went out over and they're like, oh God, he's going to go there and play for Kellar. Like, I'm in trouble for 4 years when that kid toes the rubber. So like it does go both ways, but I'm glad you touched on that, because that's not something that we'll probably end up doing a podcast on that as a short, but like, that's something that like, no, I don't think anyone has really brought that up yet. And I'm glad that you did, because it is an important part at the end of your recruiting process to be like, hey, I'm done. Appreciate everything, but I'm going elsewhere, because it does show a lot about the character of the kid, the family, and ultimately it's going to set you up for success in the future. So I'm glad you touched on that.
No, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and it's not, I think a lot of times it's not malicious. Kids and parents and families don't understand that, hey, you've been working with a kid, and hey, you call them, don't hear back, and a week later you see something on Twitter posted, hey, I'm going this way, and you never hear from the kid. And I don't think it's ever done maliciously. It's just they just don't. I think you hit it and you said it perfectly. If we're doing our job right as coaches, we're hearing no way more than we ever hear yes. And I think the only two reasons we would never hear that is if, one, we're the best recruiter and have the program where nobody's going to turn you down, and that's never going to happen. Or two, we're recruiting the wrong type of guys. And unfortunately at that point, we're not going to be very good to begin with either way. So I think as students, recruits and parents know that, like, it doesn't affect us. Like we hear no a lot. We're used to it. It's part of the business, and just to, hey, communicating that and thanking them for everything and saying, hey, I appreciate it, but I've decided to go, hey man, good luck. Anything, you always get a text from me. Good luck. If anything ever changes, keep Wesleyan in mind. There's a reason why we recruited you. If something changes, we'd love to revisit that conversation, but good luck, man. Hope you have a great career. And if you're playing a conference team, just take it easy on us when you play us, that 2 or 3 times a year. So,
and the other thing, just to piggyback on it too, is like the communication end of things becomes so big when you get to college, from player to coach to player. Like, it shows that you have that wherewithal to be able to kind of handle those conversations. And it's not always going to be like, yes, you're going to have tough conversations, but it's just general, like, you're working with a kid. Like, there's so many times when I was at RPI where, like, I would say stuff, or Siena or West Alabama, where I'd say something and it would, like, yeah. And finally, like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, no. Okay, like, I need you to tell me that, because I'm talking to you and I'm you're telling me, like, don't be a yes man to me. Like, tell me, like, hey, Glass, that doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, now I can figure out another way to say what it is I'm trying to say that might click. And I think, like, it shows that communication end. And, the other side is, like, you need your players to communicate when they get to school. Like, they need to tell you when things aren't going well. They need to tell you, my famous example, we had a kid, God, I love this kid. I won't say his name, but we had a kid who, I'll never forget this. One of our other players came out to me and he was like, hey, I got this professor who, he's not letting me out of this test. And we had a game. And I was like, well, it's an excused absence. What do you mean? He was like, well, this player had his appendix out last year and he didn't let him make up the test. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, he didn't make up the test. And I was like, no. He's missing his appendix? He was like, yes. So, like, I stopped practice and I brought everyone in. I was like, listen, I want to be very clear here. If you enter into this school and you have a body part, and at some point during your career, you are missing a body part, like, I need to know that. You can't just be missing a body part and not communicate that with me. Like, what are we doing? And it was a younger kid, and, like, he ended up being one of my favorite players. And, like, from that point, I was like, it's easy if you're missing an arm or a leg here, but, like, if you're missing something that you entered into this school with from a body part standpoint, like, I kind of need to know that's an important piece of information that you're just leaving out. So, like, and everyone made light of it after that, and, like, we got better at it. But, like, my point is, you have to be able to communicate some of this stuff, and it starts in it's not just the finish end of the recruiting process. It is the entire recruiting process of being able to answer phone calls and have communications, because that's where ultimately you're really going to get a feel for the kid and whether or not he's going to fit into your program and be a fit for you and your coaching staff. And being able to figure that out during, like, this long recruiting process is really important for kids to understand and families to understand. Like, you got to be able to communicate nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a lifelong skill, and it's something that's, gosh, it's only going to benefit you. I promise you that. The quicker you can learn how to do it and get better at it, it's only gonna help you in the long run, no matter what you do. Baseball, not baseball, anything in between. So, well,
I thank you for joining us tonight. I'm so happy that we were able to connect and get on here and do this. And I'm super excited to see what you guys are capable of doing this year. So thank you so much. If there's anything you ever need, obviously let me know. And I'm super happy and couldn't be more, proud of what you've been able to do. And now you get to go be a head coach and and learn what it's like to now have all the decisions fall on you.
Yeah, practice cancel on Sunday because of rain, and my wife is telling me the sun comes out for about 15 minutes. Oh, you guys could have practiced. I don't know what you're talking about, all that stuff. I will say I'm a little disappointed. I did prep myself for, what we're going on about an hour and a half right now, maybe a little less, but like I had my sheet of Coach Rossi's stories of my experiences that I was kind of holding out hope that it might just be an hour and a half of just enlightening the world of our experience and what what Coach Rossi prepared us for. Because I'll tell you one thing with Coach Rossi, with those working for him as a volunteer, and if you can get through that, everything else that you deal with, whether it be as an assistant coach or as a head coach, it'll be like the best thing in the world. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. If you can do that and do what he asks you to do, you'll never work a day in your life because it's easy. And I think, I don't know if he meant to do that, but he did. And I think that's why you talked about all the coaches that have been here and done that. The different levels and where they're at, it's because of him. I don't think that at the time, but there's a reason why I still call him once or twice a week just to check in. And so I was prepared for that. So,
it's funny because you're going to have coaches listen to this and it shines through and everything. It is like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I said this with Rob, I've said this with a lot of coaches, like, there's times when you're an assistant working for him where you're like, why am I doing this? Like, what is this all about? And then there's going to come, something is going to come up, like, especially in your first year of being a head coach, and you're going to be like, I get it. Now it was 20 years ago, but now I get why he did it. And it's wild. It's wild.
Why am I doing this right now? But I would rather be doing this than what I had to do, 13 years ago. It's like, gosh, this is awesome. I'd much rather do this. And,
I've told this story before on here in one of our podcasts, but I remember distinctly. It was 2019. Marist was playing Siena. It snowed, and our field was open for them to use. And he was like, he shows up. I was already at the field. I opened the field. I beat him there. And I open the field. I go into my office. I got a bunch of stuff. I come out to the field. He's sitting in the dugout. I'm walking out. He's like, you're late. I'm like, I'm not late. How'd you get on the field? He's like, well, it was open. I was like, who do you think opened it? He was like, I was sitting in my car down the street. I watched you. You were late. You weren't here on time. And I was like, what do you mean you were sitting in your car? Like, no, you weren't sitting in your car, because if you were actually here, you'd be standing at the gate waiting to give it to me that I was late. So then, like, there's like a very thin layer of snow on the field. He was like, there's snow out here. What are we going to do? And I was like, you're going to be fine. It is 8:00 in the morning. It's freezing out here, and I'm only out here because I knew you would be here. I don't even want to be here right now. I was like, the sun is out. This snow will be melted in about an hour.
Yeah.
No, I'm not making this up. It's like 9:05, and he was like, there's still a little bit of snow on the warning track. You said it was going to be gone in an hour. And I was like, Coach, I'm about to throw you off of this field. He's like, I'm just saying, you said it was going to be an hour. Like, you should know how long it takes to melt off this field. And I was like, this is exactly what I figured this day was going to be like.
It's amazing to me too, like, just with all that, I bring up the coaches, and it's again, like, you and I never crossed paths at Siena. It's not like we worked together, but right. We got to know each other, and there's a relationship there. And like, I know you're close with Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy is probably one of my closest, besides guys that I may have worked with, closest coaching friends, and we never overlapped at Siena. There was just that, hey, I worked at Siena. He was at Fordham after we left, and you see those guys out recruiting. But gosh, I mean, I talk to Jimmy constantly. And it's amazing that network that he's created among, with, guys that I've been around, Rob and George and Elliot and Jimmy, and God, I mean, again, I'm leaving guys off, and I don't mean to, but
it's insane. Like, the amount of guys that have coached with him and played with him or played for him, that, like, between, I mean, we had you, we had Jimmy, we had Rob, Billy Solano, who, Billy recruited me. I've known Billy for 20 plus years. and George Brown and, Elliott, who you hit on, and I'm going to miss people too.
Oh, yeah.
But like just the amount of guys that are still in college baseball that are really good at what they do. And, it's wild because you don't like, you hear people talk about this and like who have been through it that are like, if you can make it through that, like you can literally make it through anything. And it's true. And it's like, it's not like we say this as like, it's a bad thing. Like it's not a bad thing. It's just the amount of stuff you do as like a volunteer or a volunteer who's the second assistant is not necessarily doesn't match up with your pay. And you're like, what am I doing here?
And it's not the most glamorous. And there's a lot of things that, again, I mean, you've heard, I'm sure people, you tell them you're a baseball coach and like, man, you show up for practice. Like, no, like that's like, even as a college coach, like a lot of times people think, oh, you have a 3-hour practice and you go home and it's like, and it's like, nah, but I mean, everything, he prepared people for is incredible because
I remember there was a day he walked into the office. It was the summer, and I don't even know what he was like. Hey, I brought this dandelion puller. Can you get out there? I was on the field for a good 5 hours just pulling dandelions. And like at the time, and it's funny because I've told this story too. Like at the time, I was like, "Yo, this is insane! Like, what am I doing?" And then fast forward 15 years. I'm standing in the third base box, 2021, coaching at Ithaca. And all of a sudden, Coach Val is standing behind me in the third base box. Recently retired Coach Val, legend in this game. And he's like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, hi, Coach. I'm like, coaching? What's up? He's like, oh, I'm going to pull the weeds on this field. Nobody does it anymore. And I'm like, you guys are the same. This is wild to me. But like, it's funny because like, those guys, and I used to say this all the time, like I came up in this game with, and you did too, like I came up in this game and I affectionately called them dinosaurs. Like Gary Rundle's at West Alabama, had been at West Alabama. He was a head coach at Division II level for, I want to say like 32 years at the time. Coach Rossi obviously ends up at like 55 and Carl ends up at 36. I came up in this game with guys who would be like, they forgot more than I know about this game.
Yeah, for sure.
It's funny to me, like how sometimes like they get dismissed on some things where like, it'd be like, hey man, this guy's won 1,000 games at the Division III level. Like if he tells you to stand on your head and swing, like just humor him because he's seen 500 of you in his life. Like he probably has a pretty good idea of what he's driving at here. Like just go ahead and give it a try. It might not be, what you think this newfangled hitting stuff is, but like give it a try. Let's see what happens. Guys won 1,000 games. Like been to the World Series. They've had some success. Like just give it a try. And like it's so true. Like I think like, the older I get, obviously the more it's like, I'm so appreciative and grateful for all of that stuff that I learned under all of those guys, but like, I wish that I asked more questions when I was a younger coach. And like, you don't know what you don't know.
Well, and you can't go back, you wish you knew what you knew now, you know what I mean? And the things that you wonder and you think you've got it all figured out as a young assistant or even as a young head coach, and you're like, oh God, man, I wish I just would have listened a little bit more and asked some more questions. But yeah, sorry to make you go down that rabbit hole, but I had to.
No, it's one of my favorite rabbit holes, honestly. Like I love that guy. I talk to him all the time still. Like, I'll call him at 6, like, he'll email me things at like 3 a.m. I'm like, will you stop emailing me at 3 a.m? And I'll email him at like 5 when I'm up. And he's like, what are you doing up? You going somewhere? I'm like, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just starting my day.
Banker's hours at 5 o'clock in the morning.
You show up to the office at 6. He's like, oh, banker's hours around here. I'm already eating my lunch. As he pulls out a chicken salad sandwich to eat with you.
Oh gosh.
God, he's the best.
And I just people probably don't understand it, but just the stories and the things that, gosh, you could spend with those guys that are still in coaching and around coaching and in the base. Like, I just love to hear all the different stories, because that would be an entertaining episode for anybody that knows or has come across Coach Rossi.
We're probably gonna have to do one. But like, I'll end our podcast with this. We'll sign off. Everyone's probably like fast forwarding through this part, but I don't care. This was one of my all time favorite stories. Because I have a lot of them, but one of my all time favorite stories in 2010. We're set for new uniforms at Siena. This is about the time where everyone, like, guys were throwing the cuffs of their pants under their cleats and ruining their pants, and the victory pants came out with the stirrups for the Clemson Cup pants. So he decides he's going to order Clemson Cup pants, right? He has no idea like what he's doing, how to order them, whatever, right? We're sitting in the office. It's Coach. You know how the office is set up. Like, for anyone who's listening, like, you're just facing a wall. It's Coach Rossi next to the windows that looks out over the field. Me, a filing cabinet, me, and then Jimmy. And we had, like, they're not desks. It's just a table. You guys had the upgrade when you got there. So he's like trying to order it, and you hear him like, he's mumbling under his breath over there. And all of a sudden he just picks up the phone and he like spins over, puts his feet up on the desk, and he's facing Jimmy and I. And he's like, he just starts talking. He's like, "Hey, what's going on?" Yep. No, like, and we can obviously only hear one side of the story or the conversation. He's like, "Yeah, no, like fall's going okay, blah, blah, blah. Got a couple guys, think we're going to be okay." Like 5 minutes into the conversation, he's like, "All right, listen, the real reason I called here, like I can sit here and talk all day, but I got to order these pants. How do you order your pants?" And he's like, okay. He's like, "Well, like, who do you go? Like, what? How do I get that? Like, how do I get your cut?" And I was like, "Your cut?" And I turn and look at Jimmy, and I was like, "He's not talking to who I think he's talking to, is he?" And Jimmy's like, "I think he is." So he finishes the conversation, doesn't say a word, just puts his phone down and goes back to hunting and pecking on his computer, as we all know he does. And I was like, whoa. I was like, "We're not, no. I said, "Who were you just on the phone with?" He's like, "Jack." And I was like, "Jack Leggett?" He was like, "Yeah, why?" And I'm like, you can't just call Jack Leggett and ask about Clemson Cup pants. It's what they're called and named after them, and not just be like, and just go back to working like it's normal. And then, like, he tells the whole story. Like, he's known Jack for, like, he was the head coach of Vermont for a very, very long time before, he went to Clemson and did all that. And they're super tight to this day, and like he knows all of his coaching tree and all those guys, like, but I was like, my mind was blown as a 23-year-old kid sitting there like, wait a minute, you can't just call Jack Leggett. This is like the height of Clemson.
And ask him about his baseball pants.
How do I order your pants? And then just go back to work like it's normal. Like, it might be normal for you, but it's not normal for us. Like, you got to like lead with something here. Oh, it was great. One of my favorite stories ever. Just right back to hunting and pecking on his computer. Like, that was completely normal. I was like, you just called a legend and just like, whatever. Yeah. Which, it's awesome. They don't make him like him anymore.
No, they do not. That is 100% true. Typing up his things.
Petey Larson. Petey Larson was the other one we had on too.
No, Pete. Yeah, and Pete's in pro ball now, and he's got one of my former players at ISU he was with AAA. Because who's Pete with? He's with
Twins.
He's with AAA.
St. Paul Saints.
Yes, St. Paul. So their AAA team, we've got a lefty that was with us at ISU that we recruited. And he actually just got called up to the Twins. This is like the second or third time he's been up with them, the big club, but he's been with Pete, for a couple of years now up in AAA. So, but yeah, those are the connections. Like that's crazy.
Excited. PD actually lives like 5 minutes from me here in Rochester.
Really? That's awesome.
He's on his way back. Awesome. I'm excited to see him. I haven't seen him all summer, obviously. So
we fired up to see him.
I will.
So, well, good.
But,
well, hey, I appreciate
thank you.
I extended that probably by another 15 minutes by opening up that can of worms. But I appreciate you having me on. So,
yeah, no, thanks for coming on. And, I look forward to seeing how you guys do this year. And if you got any questions, they inevitably come up, and I'm happy to answer them. I went through it, the growing pains of being a first-year head coach after taking over for a guy who left after a long time.
Thankfully, they haven't been too bad as of yet. I'm sure they will. It's only getting started, though. That's the thing.
Wait till you write your first lineup card.
The fall is easy. Yeah, easy.
Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. We look forward to having you back next week to listen to what we have coming up in the future. So, thanks.
Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.